Alrighty, it's June 16th, 2022, and time for another exciting planning board meeting, starting with some preliminary matters, like, for example, adoption of a couple of resolutions. Could I get a motion on adoption of the resolutions for Potomac Farm Estates and ELP Bethesda at Rock Spring?
No, we have to
Oh,
split.
actually, I'm going to split them because some folks were not here when those cases were heard. So starting with Potomac Farm Estates.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You need to abstain.
I'm abstaining.
And
Jerry, I'm
opposed,
abstaining.
so that's 4-0-1 with Jerry abstaining. How about ELP Bethesda at Rock Spring Phase 1B site plan?
I'm okay.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That is approved unanimously. The minutes from June 2nd?
Move for approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Those are approved, and that brings us to the roundtable discussion with the planning director.
Thank you. For the record, Gwen Wright, Planning Director. I'll make a few introductory remarks, and then I wanted to focus the main part of my presentation on some of the events and activities that we are undertaking to celebrate Pride Month. A few things about other projects. I want to give a shout out to the Wheaton team. They had an excellent open house on Tuesday. They also helped man the table at Taste of Wheaton. So we are out there getting out to the community with our Wheaton Downtown study and getting a lot of great ideas from the community. You all know that the Silver Spring plan was approved. There are a number of follow-up things happening, including the Silver Spring Downtown Overlay Zone, which had a public hearing at the County Council yesterday. And we're going to be bringing to you the sectional map amendment in the next couple of weeks. So the plan is approved, but there are still these follow-up and implementation activities that need to happen. We've been giving a lot of tours of the Wheaton headquarters building. We had the co-location directors oversight committee come and tour the building last week, and also the council does a summer fellows program, and they bring in 8 or 9 mainly graduate students in public policy and public administration, and the summer fellows work all summer with various council staff, and they came and toured the building. Everyone has been extremely enthusiastic and excited to have the new building here, to see it, to see all of the wonderful attributes of the building. We are busily filling a lot of vacant positions. I think we were very lucky in that we didn't have quite as many vacancies as Parks and some of our other sister departments, but we are continuing to fill a lot of vacancies. I think we're down at this point to maybe only about 10 vacancies, which is pretty much what we average. We always, just through attrition and so forth, end up with, about 10 positions vacant at a time. But we're keeping our standards high, and we're advertising, recruiting, interviewing, and hiring some great people. Those are just my general updates about what's going on in the department. You're going to be seeing some additional master plans this fall, like Tacoma Park minor master plan amendment and rustic roads, and you're going to be hearing more about the pedestrian master plan. But those will be coming up through the summer and the fall. So with that, I'd like to turn to our celebration of Pride Month. And we are very, very pleased to have a really strong commitment to the LGBTQIA+ community. If we could go to the next slide, please. As you know, the commission as a whole developed a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement in June of 2021. And in that, we really recognized our commitment to diversity, to equity, and to inclusion. And that is, again, for our people of all backgrounds who we want to have participate and thrive in our workplace. Next, as part of that, we are celebrating Pride Month. The whole commission is celebrating Pride Month, but Montgomery Parks and Montgomery Planning are doing some very special events. We have already had one event, which was on June 8th, an event called There's No One Way to Be LGBTQIA. And our Parks Department has had a number of events, including a upcoming drag queen story hour, and on June 29th, drag queen bingo, which I think is going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be right here at our Wheaton headquarters building. But in addition, and this is some images from the June 8th event, where we had a really fascinating conversation with different members of the LGBTQIA plus community, who talked about their own experiences in terms of coming out, their experiences of, making decisions about how to live their lives as, in a true and honest way, as in some cases gay, in some cases transgender people. And it was a really, really fascinating discussion, and it reinforced the idea that really and truly everyone goes on their own path. There is not one way to express yourself. And everyone in that group had followed their own paths to great success. And it was really, really inspiring to hear. We also, during this, had a little bit of an introduction about the history of the Pride flag and how it's evolved over time, and even a little history about how Pride Month came to be and why it was in June with a commemoration of the Stonewall incident in Greenwich Village in New York in the late 60s. Next, please. But one of the things we want to really highlight is that Montgomery County actually has a very long and very proud heritage of supporting LGBTQIA plus folks. Although they are underrepresented in our historical narrative, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit and how Rebecca Ballo and her team are trying to correct that. We actually go as far back as 1984 with the Montgomery County Council passing a bill that made it illegal to discriminate based on sexual orientation in housing, employment, and public accommodations. And that was a very, I think, early and bold step. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn things over to Rebecca for a moment. One of the things that she and her team have been working really hard on is to talk about the history of the LGBTQIA plus movement, and to work with statewide groups to recognize important historical sites and the people associated with those sites who need to be recognized as part of the historic context for LGBTQIA people. So, Rebecca, if you'd like to take it.
Thank you, Director Wright. Good morning, members of the board. Again, this is Rebecca Ballo, for the record, supervisor with the Historic Preservation section. So as Director Wright mentioned, this effort goes back a few years earlier into the mid-2010s. The National Park Service during the Obama administration released what we call a context study about LGBTQIA history and heritage in the United States. And those of us who work in local governments in the Washington, D.C. metro area, we started to convene kind of a round table. I was in Northern Virginia at the time, and when Claire Kelly was here, she was one of the inaugural members that worked with us and with the Washington, D.C. Historic Preservation Office and with other local governments. The point was to try and just get an initial list together. What were the sites associated with LGBTQ heritage in the D.C. metro region that could possibly be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places or could possibly be eligible for local designation. So each of us in the local governments built on that effort that was created by the National Park Service. So to that end, in 2018, Preservation Maryland, which is our statewide historic preservation not-for-profit, convened a team and hired a historian, Susan Ferentinos, to write a statewide historic context for the state of Maryland specific to LGBTQ history. So this was a really pioneering document nationally. Kentucky is the only other state in the United States. I know, right? Kentucky has a fabulous LGBTQ context study for their state. Other cities in California and New York and Washington, D.C. have done some really important work. But then Maryland was the second state to create our own statewide context specific to Maryland. How is LGBTQ history, expressed in the built environment and with the specific themes of Maryland history, like with maritime history, industrial history, and the history of political activism in the D.C. and Washington suburbs. So our office was really proud to be part of that effort. We supported the documentation and the survey effort, and we were also readers for that project. So that was finalized in 2020. And then, so building on that, you can see here is a screenshot of the 2016 LGBTQ America study that was promulgated by the National Park Service. So then after the statewide context came out, my office applied for a grant to the state to list 2 LGBTQ significant properties to the Maryland inventory of historic properties. So the first property that we wrote the MIHP form for was the Susan Silber house. So Susan Silber, if you're not familiar with her, she still lives here in Tacoma Park. Susan is a retired LGBTQ activist and lawyer who specialized in family and labor law, and her work was fundamentally critical to the success of equitable treatment for LGBTQ families and workers in Montgomery County. And she was the city attorney for the city of Tacoma Park from 1981 to 2017. We also surveyed Bruce Williams' house. So Bruce Williams was a Tacoma Park City Council member and mayor of Tacoma Park, and Bruce was the first openly LGBTQ elected official in the state of Maryland. So separately, we applied for a further grant to list the home of Robert Coggin to the National Register of Historic Places, and we have the draft of that, and we're finishing up that work now with the state. So Robert Coggin is recognized as the founder of the LGBTQ rights movement in Montgomery County. He founded the Suburban Maryland Gay Alliance in 1982, and it was Robert's work that was absolutely fundamental in securing passage of this anti-discrimination legislation that Director Wright mentioned earlier. And I look forward to presenting the full history of Robert's work and his home and places associated with his work later this fall, probably during October for LGBTQ History Month. So our next steps, we're going to be advancing this National Register nomination. Researching LGBTQ history is a fundamental component of all of our master plan amendments. And we're going to continue to partner with Montgomery County Public Schools. For the last year, the social studies curriculum has been incorporating LGBTQ history at the high school level. And I've been working with their project coordinator to give them information, to share information back and forth. Been working with Montgomery History on a series of lectures and survey work. We'll continue to work with the Montgomery County Department of Health. It was the Department of Health that invited the planning department to come and table at Pride in the Plaza later this month, and we'll be working with them on that, and then also continuing to reach out with MoCo Pride Youth. I'll end the presentation by highlighting for everybody, a couple of months ago, my office, I was contacted by a woman, Tatiana Walk-Morris, who wanted to write an article for Planning magazine about LGBTQ history and planning. And she reached out to the folks that did the statewide survey in Maryland, the folks that did the statewide survey in Kentucky. But she was really interested in how is this work, how do we do this work at the local levels? How do planners, like urban planners and planning departments, how should they be aware of this heritage work, of this history work, and how can this inform what we do as part of our master planning work? And so she learned more about our project in Maryland. She learned more about our project here in Montgomery County, and it was great that she reached out and then highlighted the work in this article, because this goes to planning departments nationwide, and I think it's very important that people realize not just history and historic preservation are critical parts of urban planning work, but also this aspect of it, and in particular that as Director Wright had said, that all people see that their histories and their contributions in the community, that they see themselves here in the community. One of the gratifying parts about the Maryland study is that it showed, what are queer spaces, where are the spaces where this history is evident, and it is everywhere. It is the Naval Academy. It is, a restaurant and a bar in Hagerstown, and it is here in Veers Mill Village in Montgomery County, and the awareness is important, and then raising up that history is important. So I was very, very proud to be part of this work, and we're looking to continue it and bring it back to you for further updates. And that concludes my presentation, and thank you for the opportunity to update you.
And I thank you, Rebecca, because your team is doing amazing work. I did want to reiterate, we are going to be at Montgomery County Pride in the Plaza, which is going to be in Silver Spring in the plaza in front of the Civic Building on June 26th. We're going to have a table. It's going to be a fun event. I encourage everyone to stop by. And I just want to also conclude by saying, this is really part of our bigger effort to create a very robust equity agenda for planning. And we've talked to you about different elements of that equity agenda for planning, everything from our peer review group to incorporating this as a criteria in all of our performance evaluations, the participation in training and education about equity. And we see these pride activities as a very big part of that as well. So I am really, really proud of the work Rebecca and her team have done. I'm very, very proud of our overall equity agenda for planning, and we'll keep moving forward and making progress. And that is it, if you have any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and the work that you, Director Wright, and Rebecca are doing is very important. And I'm sorry to have missed the panel discussion. I was all ready to participate, and then I was unwell, so I was not able to share my own stories. But I will briefly say, when I came out in 2011, at a time where I was legal counsel at the State Department, there was no Pride event like this where it was integrated into the workplace. And I remember thinking, gosh, I can't be myself. And what is my life going to be like? What am I going to do? Am I going to find a partner? And, today I have a husband and I have 3 kids, and I'm here before the commission. And those are things that I think we sometimes don't realize, that by having a truly diverse and inclusive environment, how that actually affects the psyche of employees, and it makes them believe that they can do whatever they want, even if certain people perceive them to be, quote, different. So I just want to say thank you so much. I didn't have these kind of resources when I probably needed it, but to see that all of our employees can take advantage and have that kind of inclusive community is so important. And, you know, I'm the first openly gay commissioner here. And I say openly gay because I'm sure there were others that just were not out. And I think that's also an important designation to make, an important part of the narrative, that there were so many people before us that could not be themselves. And I was appointed in 2019, and Councilmember Evan Glass was the first openly gay council member in Montgomery County. So, you know, progress is only relatively recent, and I think we have to remember that. So I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I remember attending a session, and Rebecca, maybe you can expand on this a little bit. I believe there was a teacher that was fired from an elementary school for being gay. And I know there were some talks about either renaming that school or having some sort of historic designation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So in the 1970s, a man named Joe Akinfora, who was an earth sciences teacher at Parkland Middle School, he taught there he was just teaching there for a year. I forget if it was 72 or 74, but I have that. He was summarily fired by Montgomery County Public Schools for being an openly gay man. He appealed that decision up to the state Supreme Court, and Montgomery County Public Schools continued to litigate that, and the state ultimately determined that MCPS had the right to fire him, to terminate his employment for being openly gay. I believe he now lives on the West Coast. The Washington Post continues to do, profiles and interviews with Mr. Akinfora. And again, he taught at that school. So that site was, I believe, put on the PIN map for LGBTQ. There's a Google PIN map for LGBTQ America that lists sites of interest and importance to LGBTQ history, and that site was included in the list that we gave to the state for all the sites that we knew of in Montgomery County. And it could be a site potentially in the future for a historic marker or other types of commemoration or learning about that incident, because it was, the firing of Joe Akinfora that resonated deeply within the gay and lesbian community, from our research and from our interviews with people's experiences here in the 1970s and the 1980s, and really did help to reinforce. There was a lot of activism happening downtown in Washington, D.C. with advocacy groups, and there was a vacuum here in the suburbs. So it was one of the incidents that also galvanized Robert Coggin and others to really form their own advocacy groups here in Montgomery County in the early 1980s to advocate for equal protection under the law.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think if we do have an opportunity to either do a plaque or have some sort of larger designation for this individual, I really think those kind of people that were really paving the way for individuals like myself today are the ones that truly need to be recognized, because that level of sacrifice is definitely part of the narrative for the larger community. So thank you for giving us a little lesson on that, and thanks again for all of your hard work.
Yeah, I really find this really moving. When I heard Carl Morgan's story of coming out, it's really just so much pain. And, I just think that this is something that we're still not there yet. And I just think it's really important to highlight these experiences and the courage that people have had in coming out. And, so many people have, suffered violence, and it's torn apart their families, and it's just so raw. So I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate the courage of commission employees who've shared their stories.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, is that it for the planning director's report?
Yes, that is it.
Okay, we'll be back in just a minute for, oh, sorry, we missed an extension request earlier because appeared a little bit further down on the agenda. Can we get a motion to approve the extension request for the Block Kilmarock Administrative Subdivision?
So moved.
Second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That is approved. So we'll be back in a minute for Montgomery Auto Sales Park Site Plan Amendment. We are back with item 8, Montgomery Auto Sales Park Site Plan Amendment. And we have with us Phil Estes, Sandra Pereira, Patrick Butler, and others. I'm not sure anybody wants to make a presentation on this. I think it's relatively routine, but is there something you wanted to say to introduce this? Mr. Estes.
Good morning, Philip Estes with Up County Division. This is a minor site plan amendment, 820060002D. It's a minor site plan amendment to change condition number 2 to allow the height from 24 feet to 30 feet, and that's the only condition that's being requested for modification, and staff recommends approval of that.
Mr. Chair, based on the fact that it's within the zoning envelope and there's no public concern or raised about it at all, I would move that, based on the staff report, that there's sufficient evidence to approve. So I'm going to recommend approval and move for approval.
Let me, just before you do that, I just want to see if the applicant had any issues they wanted to raise. They're shaking their heads no, they're sitting in the audience.
I got one comment, but
Okay.
back earlier, legal representation of this whole had asked the Maryland Toll Authority to put signs on that would get you to the auto park, just by name of the street, our boulevard. So they said, well, we can't change signs for a year, but I don't know whether there was a continuing effort. As you're coming westbound and getting off at Briggs Cheney, the ask was, could you put say, Automotive Boulevard, and then coming the other way, the loop ramp. If you come down the loop ramp, there is a sign that says Automotive Boulevard, but there was a request, so I don't know whether some of the legal people are still pursuing that, but that was one of the things that came up. So
Yeah, I don't think that's in front of us today.
no, I
It's just-
understand
yeah.
that, but that was a pushback from the state on. This is a generator of gasoline fees and everything, motor registration, Easy Pass, that helps support transportation in the state, but little pushback on the part of the state.
Okay, so I think Carol's made a motion to approve, and Jerry, I'm going to take that as a second.
Yes, I'll second it.
Yeah, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That is approved unanimously. Thanks very much. And we're going to be back in just 1 minute, hopefully, with item 10, Park Potomac Sketch Plan Amendment. Okay, it's time to consider item 10, the Park Potomac Sketch Plan Amendment, which, much like the last item, appears exceptionally straightforward, but I wanted to see if Ms. Pereira or Mr. Butler or Mr. Server had anything that they wanted to say to introduce this item.
Apologies. Good morning, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeff Server with Up County. This is an extension request essentially for the sketch plan number 32019-002A, which is a request to extend the sketch plan's eligible period of submission for a site plan by 18 months. So it's extensively, it would be from June 2022 to December of 2023. And that is the extent of the application in front of you.
Great. Does the applicant have anything they want to say?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Philip Hummel of Miles and Stockbridge. We represent applicant Folger Pratt here. We thank staff for their hard work on this, the Area 3 team, Mr. Server, Ms. Pereira, and Mr. Butler for their attention to this matter. We don't have a formal presentation, but our team is available to answer questions. We have virtually, I believe, Josh Etter, Senior Vice President of Development of Folger Pratt, Josh Sloan of VICA appearing also virtually. And next to me is Sarah Brandt Varel, Development Manager with Folger Pratt, who's appearing before the Planning Board for the first time. She comes to us from the City of Alexandria, where she was an urban planner in the Development Review Division, and we're glad she's working with us on this case. So again, we concur with staff's analysis and the recommendation for approval as conditioned, and we're here to answer any questions.
Okay, well, welcome. Carol, do you want to say something? Or make a
Yeah,
motion?
I would move for approval based on the staff's recommendation in the staff report.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That is approved. And moving right along, we'll be back in a minute for item 5, which is the annual school test and school utilization report. Okay, we're ready for the annual school test and school utilization report. And speaking of Pride Month, I see that's Bayard Rustin Elementary School, who was really interesting figure, but also speaking of people who had to hide their sexuality, that's another unfortunate example of really courageous people who are persecuted for being gay. Just couldn't help but point that out. In any case, we're going to talk about the school utilization situation.
All right.
Take it away.
Okay, thanks. Good morning. For the record, this is Jesus Beck from the Countywide Planning and Policy Division. I'm here to present the FY 2023 Annual School Test and School Utilization Report, which the Growth and Infrastructure Policy requires to be reviewed and certified by the board before the start of each fiscal year, which would be July 1st. The order that I'll be presenting today is first an overview of the annual school test guidelines, which explains the methods and standards that we use for the test, and then I'll go over the actual annual school test results, which will determine which school service areas are placed in each school, utilization premium payment tier level, and then I'll go over some things that we found from putting together a school utilization report to understand other supplemental information about the school adequacy situation countywide. So first, about the annual school test guidelines, we're still using the version 1.0 that was approved by the board in December 2020. The full document is posted on our webpage for anyone interested in all the nitty-gritty details of how we conduct this test. But today, since we have a new Commissioner Rubin, who probably hasn't seen this before, and I'm pretty sure the other board members are also wanting to relearn how we do the test, so I'll do a quick overview of that. So first thing, we use data provided by MCPS in their annual Educational Facilities Master Plan and Capital Improvements program. The table here shows a preliminary version of their data for this year. They haven't published their official data yet, but we received the official data. But this table is enough to show how we interpret that data into our test. If we look at the first row under projections, not the one under preliminary, where it says 22-23, that is MCPS's projections for the upcoming school year, which is actually the current year for our fiscal year. So for fiscal year 2023, that is the first, it's a projection, but it's our current school year. So the next column is what we considered the one-year projections, and we count outwards until we reach the four-year projections, which would be the school year 26-27. We count 4 years out to account for the general time it takes for a development project to come before the board, get approved, and see residential units being completed. In some cases, we do modify the data we receive from MCPS. As you can see in this table, it shows the perfect example where Woodward High School is scheduled to open in the school year 25-26, and we see their full capacity reflected in the data, but the enrollment is showing 0, which is because they do not have their boundary study done, and they cannot give a projection for how many students will be attending there. At the same time, Walter Johnson High School, which we know will be relieved by Woodward High School, is still showing their normal enrollment projections without considering the boundary student reassignment through boundary changes. There are also other high schools that we know will be involved in this student reassignment plan. So if MCPS indicates this in their documents, we include all the high schools or all the schools involved in these types of capital solutions. Sometimes it might not be a capital solution, just some of these student reassignment plans will hypothesize the data for 4 years later and use a balanced utilization across all the schools involved. So this might not be the real projections that will result once MCPS does a boundary study, but it's the best that we can do this far out. So using those numbers, we measure them against this set of standards, which is a combination of utilization rate and seat deficits for each school service area. So for example, if we have an elementary school that's projected to be at 125% utilization rate, you see the purple line showing where it comes, and then a seat deficit of a seat deficit of 100, it places it right in a Tier 1 UPP placement. But at the same time, it's only 2 students away from reaching the seat deficit threshold to the next UPP tier level, Tier 2. So in that case, we say it has an adequacy ceiling of 2, and if a development application comes in with an expected student generation of more than 2 students, we adjust the UPP rate that is applied to the project upwards to reflect the actual number of students beyond those 2 students at the next tier level. So this is what our actual test result table looks like, which is included in the attachments. You can see the data that we're using for the test, and then the UPP placement of each school service area, and the adequacy ceilings to subsequent tier levels. So for FY 2023, at the high school level, we see Gaithersburg and Northwest High School service areas in Tier 1 UPP placements. Clarksburg, Richard Montgomery, and Quince Orchard High School in Tier 2. There aren't any in Tier 3, and this is what it looks like when you show them together. And you see a cluster around the Gaithersburg area, but we do know Crown High School, that will be opening in 2027, which is 1 year away from our evaluation year for the annual school test, is supposed to relieve Gaithersburg Northwest, Richard Montgomery, and Quince Orchard High Schools once it opens. So for the next annual school test, if the project doesn't get delayed, we will be showing these schools as relieved. For middle schools, there weren't any UPP placements. At the elementary school level, there are 3 schools in Tier 1, these 4 schools in Tier 2, and then 1 school, Mill Creek Town Elementary School, in a Tier 3 UPP. This just shows them put together. Sometimes when an area has been placed in utilization premium placement tiers at more than one school level, a project will have to sum the rates up together and apply it to their units. For the FY 2023, we don't have any service areas that are placed in more than one school level UPP, but this just shows the UPP tier across elementary school and high school to kind of compare where there will be higher rates applied. We also try to highlight school service areas with lower adequacy ceilings that are more likely to be triggered when a development with lots of residential units come in. At the high school level, we didn't find any with 15 or less seats. At the same time, we used these adequacy ceilings to kind of create a heat map of utilization levels across the county. So we can see, in addition to the high schools that were highlighted and put in UPP placements, there you can see on the east side, Blake and Paint Branch High School, and then Churchill High School are sort of increasing in their utilization levels. At the middle school level, likewise, there weren't any service areas with an adequacy ceiling with 15 or less seats, and there aren't any UPP placements, but the heat map can kind of show that some schools are operating at slightly higher utilization levels than the others. At the elementary school, we found these 6 schools: Bannockburn, Farmland, Highland View, Lake Seneca, Flora Singer and Westover Elementary Schools with lower adequacy ceilings. So if there are large development proposals that come in these areas, it is possible that their utilization premium payment factors can get adjusted upwards than our base results from the annual school test. A new thing that the 2020 Growth and Infrastructure Policy initiated is this school utilization report, which provides supplemental information, not just the annual school test results. This is part of the countywide report that we have included. You can see the full document again as an attachment, and we have it posted on the website as well. I'll go over just a few of the countywide findings. At the high school level, on the left side, you see the enrollment shown in lighter blue and the capacity shown in dark blue for the past 15 years and the next 5 years. We can see the enrollment growth kind of starting around 2016. And then it's started to surpass the capacity that the high schools have countywide. But in a few years, especially once the Woodward High School and Crown High School projects are done, you can see, at least at the countywide level, the capacity will surpass the total enrollment for high school students. On the right side, we sort of see this at an individual school perspective, and the colors are showing the percentage of schools operating at different utilization levels. Blue means they're underutilized, and dark red, that we don't see at the high school level, shows high overutilization. We again see that there are higher percentage of schools that will be operating at least at the orange utilization level, which is above 120%. But starting in 27, we see that percentage coming down when the schools are expected to be relieved by the 2 new high schools. At the middle school level, overall, partially because there are only 3 grade levels in middle school, we don't see that many capacity issues. We do see the enrollment growth starting a bit earlier than the high school, around 2013. And then the graph on the right, we can see there are hardly any schools that are highly overutilized. At the elementary school level, we see the highest struggles with keeping up with the enrollment growth that happened much earlier. We can see it starting around 2007 here. It's already seems to have plateaued even before the pandemic. The pandemic brought the enrollment down, but MCPS, although it projects that the enrollment will return to normal, they're still projecting that the enrollment growth has peaked. On the right side, we can see that there were a lot of schools operating in the red zone, but that is tapering off more and more, and it's about, we have that one school that we see in Tier 3 UPP is the red zone. Another thing we've started in this school utilization report is a housing analysis by school service area. At the moment, we're just creating these snapshots. Eventually, we're trying to get an accumulation of yearly annual data so we can see a trend of housing sales and try to compare it to the enrollment of school service areas and find a better understanding of the interrelation between both. This right now shows the high school service areas. At the top is the number of units sold in each service area, and we ordered the schools along that line and show the number of units that are built in that service area and the total number of dwelling units. So we can see that the top 2 high schools with the most sold units, Gaithersburg and Seneca Valley High School, are probably because they had a lot of development in there. You see a higher number for new units. But at the same time, the next 3 schools, which I think Churchill, Einstein, and Whitman, hardly has any new development, but there are a lot of units sold there. So that does go in line with our findings during the growth and infrastructure policy that a lot of enrollment growth is coming from turnover, not just development. At the middle school level, we're showing similar things. An interesting thing is the middle school with the highest number of sales is Pyle Middle School, which was not the highest sales high school. So there are probably more local concentrations in certain middle schools than others. For Pyle, it's a single feeder middle school to the high school. So the whole high school sales is showing up the same at the middle school level, whereas the other high schools probably have more than one middle schools. So those numbers are split to different schools. At the elementary school, it's pretty similar. We do mostly see schools that are feeding to the high sales middle and high schools, but at the same time, some elementary schools that we do not see having high sales at the middle and high school levels are showing up at the elementary school levels, which probably means they have a more local concentration of real estate activity going on. So once we have a lot more annual analyses done of these housing sales analysis, we're hoping to find more conclusions about these assumptions that we're making. With that all being said, staff recommends that the board certify the FY 2023 annual school test results, which, if approved today, will take effect on July 1st.
Okay, unless there are questions or comments, we could look for a motion to certify the school test results.
Jerry says you just have a question. And what role does the portables play in this at all? Or are they still attempting to do that? And what role if they feel they have to repair or reconstruct something that's in an existing school?
So portable classrooms are used pretty much anywhere where we see higher utilization rates that are above their intended capacity, but we don't count them as actual capacity. So I guess one thing that a lot of people seem to confuse is overutilization, meaning more students in a classroom. That is not the case, because if there is overutilization, they will put more mobile classrooms at the school site. So the class sizes are generally similar.
Class sizes are not related to utilization.
Correct. It's more a formula based on staffing. Some schools have lower class sizes because they have a higher proportion of students in poverty or English language learners.
Do they then maintain their proposed improvement or building constructions? Is that, if they're going to add a school or expand a school, they maintain that in their capital program?
From my understanding, even if a school is supposed to be receiving an addition or new project, there are maintenance. They still are receiving maintenance, but at the same time, all the way down to the detail, I don't know how much.
Yeah. They have a RevX list that is built into their capital program, but it's, RevX is not necessarily the same as increasing capacity.
All right. Good. All right. Thank you.
And the school, the actual utilization payment, based on capacity, at what point is that actually finalized? Is that at building permit, or is it at use and occupancy? When is it that the actual number is known and therefore the utilization payment can be calculated?
So the numbers are, I guess, calculated during their preliminary plan approval, but the payment is made when they're coming for permits. So there may be a bit of a difference in terms of when they're paying and the actual payment rate of when they're paying. But the rate is already determined when they came for approval.
So it's a preliminary plan, but if the number of units are reduced and therefore the impact is reduced,
they'll have to come for an amendment to, when the number of units change, we amend the we amend the results
Okay, thank you.
according to the test results
It's
for
kinda
whenever
like
they
traffic
come with the
capacity.
change.
Like if your project is approved and there's traffic capacity, you're approved, even if congestion gets worse in the meantime, but you take your chances if things get better and you could have been relieved of some, fee because it got better. Well, that's life, because you pick your poison. Is there a motion to certify the school test results?
I move to certify the 2023 annual school tests as presented by staff.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. And we'll be back in a minute for Fawcett Farms. Okay, we're ready for item 9, Fawcett Farms Administrative Subdivision with Jonathan Casey.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Casey with the Up County Planning Division. Before you today is Fawcett Farms Administrative Subdivision number 6, 2022-0030. Staff is recommending approval of the admin subdivision with conditions. Subdivision is for 2 lots, one for one existing house and one new house. Just to give you an idea of where the subject property is, it is between Falls Road and Brickyard Road at the corner of Rock Run Drive and Kingsgate Road. It's in the Potomac subregion master plan. Right now, the property is improved with a single-family house with a driveway to Kingsgate Road. This application would subdivide this property. This is in the R200 zone, so the minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet. So this is the administrative subdivision. As you can see, there are 2 lots here, both of which are larger than 20,000 square feet. As I mentioned, Lot 1 will retain the existing house, but a new driveway will be installed as well as a new detached garage. And Lot 2 will have a new house on it with a new driveway. The existing driveway on Kingsgate will be removed, and 6-foot sidewalks will be provided along both frontages of the subject property. There is a residential infill compatibility standard that applies to Lot 2, as well as an established building line. Both of those are discussed in detail in the staff report. As I mentioned, the property is in 2002 Potomac Subregion Master Plan. There are no site-specific recommendations, but this application is consistent with the general recommendations in the master plan. With regard to forest conservation, there's no existing forest on the subject property. There is a request for removal of 3 variance trees, which will be mitigated for on site by planting new trees, which will be protected in a maintenance and management agreement. To summarize the administrative subdivision plan findings that are in the staff report, the lot does comply with all provisions of the subdivision regulations as well as the zoning ordinance, and meets all of the R200 standards, including the applicable established building line and residential infill compatibility standards. APF is adequate. A site distance evaluation was approved by DOT as well as a storm drain study. There are no downstream improvements required based on the information provided in that study. And on-site stormwater management will be managed via micro-infiltration trenches and dry wells. One clarification for the staff report, it indicated that the sidewalks would be porous. They are not. Those will be treated with additional micro-infiltration trenches. Staff did receive correspondence from some of the community members, some of which was attached to the staff report. We also received 2 additional items, one from the CARF regarding a larger floodplain study and or a drainage study, and I believe one of the community members submitted some slides for their presentation. But just to summarize what is in the staff report and what we've heard from the community, the primary concerns are the front setbacks and house size, the neighborhood character and compatibility, as well as the general subdivision process, adequate public facilities, primarily storm drainage, as well as stormwater management and current drainage problems. I would like to make a few corrections to the staff report. And condition 9, staff is striking the current condition C, which allows DPS to essentially waive the sidewalk construction and instead provided an alternative condition that requires the applicant to construct the sidewalk along the frontage. There's also some clarification in the body of the staff report, just to clarify that staff does not recommend any waiver of construction of the sidewalk, and that the pedestrian connection is necessary in this location. And finally, staff is recommending approval of the administrative subdivision with the new conditions or revised conditions, as well as the additional conditions in the staff report.
Thank you very much. We do have two speakers, but go ahead.
Mr. Casey, there's an approval of a concept plan for the stormwater management from DPS in there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could ask, we have two speakers signed up, Wyke Kaiser and Jason Meltzer. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anybody's name, but if they're here, now would be the time to step up to the table and we'll hear you. Are they here?
Jason,
Oh,
feel
they're
free to go
online.
ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to be here in person, but that's very good. Mr. Kaiser, go ahead. Or Mr. Meltzer, which I have Mr. Kaiser first, but if you want to go first, that's, if you guys can work it
Feel
out.
free to go ahead. I'll go after you.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go first, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee and the board for permitting me to speak this morning. My name is Jason Meltzer, and I'm the owner of the neighboring property located at Rock Run Drive, next to where the subdivision of 10701 Rock Run Drive is proposed. The proposed subdivision is contrary to the character of the neighborhood, and the other properties in that area sets a bad precedent and should be rejected. The houses on Rock Run Drive are beautiful and serene, including with high-end homes and properties uniform in size. What's actually going on here is that a developer bought an old and relatively small house on a property that was already subdivided, as the staff's report acknowledges, and is now attempting to squeeze in an additional house by subdividing the property yet again to take advantage of a hot real estate market. He apparently thinks he can sell a small house on a smaller outlier yard with essentially no backyard because the area has become very desirable. The proposed subdivision would create a substantial outlier in terms of lot size and aesthetics. The two properties at the proposed location of the subdivision would be half the size of the other properties on the street. Notably, the same developer has purchased a number of other properties in the neighborhood, including on Kingsgate Road, right next to the proposed subdivision, and build nice new homes, typically in place of old homes, without subdividing those properties, which has not detracted from the neighborhood character. And perhaps if we could pull up Home Next Door on Kingsgate, built by same developer.
Hold on, we're pulling it up.
Thank you very much.
There it is.
That's not the image. That's the image.
Oh.
So the image that Mr. Casey showed a few minutes ago showed this as a vacant lot. That's not the case. This is the house that's currently there. And you can see it's a big house on a nice, good size lot. Okay. Now can we pull up the other home on Kingsgate built by the same developer? That's it. Here's another one on Kingsgate. Nice large house built by the same developer. Okay. We can take that down and perhaps we can show old existing home picture. Here's the small home, and a property is going to be crammed in. If you're viewing this, if you're viewing the picture on the right side of the picture, okay, we can take that down. As opposed to doing what the developer did with the other two houses, here they've apparently decided they can make a quick buck from further slicing up the property, squeezing in an additional home and selling both the older home and a new home. Subdividing the property again, as I noted, will make it outlier in terms of size and aesthetics compared to the neighboring property. The developer is cramming in the additional home without regard to the neighbors or the drainage or aesthetic problems created by the proposed subdivision. The developer also plans to create two new driveways on Rock Run Drive, a new one for the old home to make room for the new home, and one for the new one with both new driveways next to my property on Rock Run Drive. To do this, they propose to remove some very large and protected trees. You heard Mr. Casey mention a variance, and if they're going to put in new trees, I assume these will be very small trees as opposed to the huge, beautiful, large trees, protected trees that are currently on the corner of that property. The developer also has proposed to build an awkward standalone garage separate from the old house, which is proposed to abut my property. They've essentially decided to turn the small backyard of the existing home into a standalone garage. There are no similar standalone garages in the area, as far as I know. This is another strange and outlier feature of what the developer is trying to do here. The proposal also includes a plan for a sidewalk to go in front of the two houses that would only go in front of the two houses on Rock Run Drive and apparently abruptly stop at or before my property. Yet another outlier feature that would look horrible, negatively impact my property, and serve essentially no function. Now, we heard today for the first time that apparently, there was an option not to include the sidewalk, but now there will definitely be a sidewalk required. This makes zero sense, as it would just end after two properties and the rest of the street has no sidewalk. It will create an eyesore, and it will also serve no function. The removal of the large trees and creation of two new driveways and potentially a sidewalk will also exacerbate an already problematic drainage area on that particular section of Rock Run Drive. The area already pools on the properties along the drainage lines, along the drainage line when it rains. The recommendation by the staff does not appear to take into account the drainage issue identified by our comment letter, and I can put an image of it up on the screen so the board can see it. This is the image titled Drainage Photo Current. That's the one. The proposed new driveways for the old home are supposed to be installed right in the middle of where this current drain is, and you can see where it's pooling. If you look toward the end of this picture, down the street, you can see three very large trees right near the drainage ditch. Those are proposed. Those are the ones Mr. Casey talked about that are proposed to be removed. Okay, they're also going to build a sidewalk in this area. To suggest that this isn't going to drastically strain the already strained drainage system is ridiculous. The proposed new driveway for the old home is also proposed to be installed right next to power lines running along the property line, as you can see in this image. Is it possible to zoom in? There you go. You can see the power lines. You can see that they go into the top of these trees next to the property. We're extremely concerned about the proposed new driveway construction location, essentially right next to the power lines and trees. We have 3 small children, 2, 5, and 7, who often play in our yard, and we have substantial safety concerns about the construction of the proposed driveway and using that proposed driveway area to construct the awkward standalone garage in the backyard. Any impact or disruption to those trees, which I don't see how could be avoidable given their current location, could easily damage the power lines and create a dangerous condition. And I can put up a picture of that location. Can we show one second. Proposed driveway construction location. There it is. The power lines run right through those tall trees on the left, and the driveway is going to try to squeeze in next to those trees to get to the backyard in this awkward standalone garage that's proposed to be built. We can take that down. Thank you so much. I also wanted to briefly read you excerpts from comments submitted by 3 other neighbors for you to see they share similar concerns. While my property will likely be most drastically impacted by the proposed subdivision and construction, I'm not alone in my concerns or in pointing out the significant problems that the proposed subdivision presents. These comments are included on pages 60 to 63 of the staff report and are also available online. These important comments appear to have been pushed to the back of a 60-plus page report document, and I want to make sure they receive the attention they deserve by this board. A neighbor 3 houses down the street from the proposed subdivision wrote, "Most of Rock Run Drive is made up of single-family homes on 1-acre lots, thereby creating a feeling of spaciousness, privacy, and peacefulness throughout the neighborhood. That was the main reason I purchased my house at great expense in this neighborhood almost 20 years ago. Many of my neighbors share this sentiment. Dividing 10701 Rock Run Drive will very likely lead to a domino effect. Many of the houses on the block are old, and developers have been buying them up and replacing them with large homes. Dividing up 10701 will incite developers who presumably have no concern for our quiet residential neighborhood to try to divide up other lots up and down Rock Run Drive, all at the expense of the neighborhood and the folks that live here, such as myself. The planning department should certainly not approve an action like this one, which is based solely on pecuniary interests that injure the residents of Rock Run Drive in this area as a whole. And that was submitted by resident at 10612 Rock Run Drive. Another neighbor who lives across the street from the proposed subdivision in my house raised similar concerns. She noted, this is a lovely woman, she noted, as a neighboring property owner, I'm very concerned about the negative impact the proposed plan would have on the visual aesthetics and property values of the neighborhood. Virtually all homes on this section of Rock Run Drive consist of a 1 acre lot. Subdividing an already subdivided lot is not consistent with the current characteristics of the neighborhood. The developer does not live on Rock Run Drive or Kingsgate Road and is apparently not concerned or interested in these issues. Rather, the developer appears to simply be trying to increase his profit by squeezing in another home on what should clearly be a single-family residential lot. Moreover, the proposed plan also includes the addition of a sidewalk, but a limited one, and one that only runs in front of a few homes, making the appearance and abrupt end of a sidewalk very awkward. There is currently no sidewalk in this neighborhood, and the addition of a small sidewalk in front of only a couple of homes would not be aesthetically pleasing or appropriate. That's the resident at 10706 Rock Run Drive. Another neighbor who lives directly across from the proposed subdivision and proposed new property wrote, we are writing to express our strong opposition to the proposed plans to subdivide Lot 1, Block 3, 10701 Rock Run Drive, Potomac, Maryland. The property is located directly across the street from our home. We feel this project would have an undesirable effect on the surrounding homes, and in particular those located at the intersection of Rock Run Drive and Kingsgate Road, all of which conform with their neighbors. Our opposition to this project is primarily based on the fact that the front elevation of the proposed new home will sit 50 feet closer to the street than its neighbors and about 100 feet closer than the home just a few doors away. To completely ignore the established setbacks of the current houses in Block 3 would set a poor precedent for future construction and be unfair to the residents in Fawcett Farms who have respected the conformity of the neighborhood. On that note, we must respectfully request this project be denied on all fronts. Respectfully, there you have it. Four different households who live right next to and across from the proposed subdivision accurately note the problems with this proposal and the utter disregard for the neighborhood. Frankly, I was shocked and disappointed when I saw the report of the staff yesterday recommending this to go forward. We urge the board to reject the proposal. If the developer wishes to tear down the old home and build a larger home on the same property, so be it. That would be in character and consistent with the current trend in the neighborhood and what he's done throughout the rest of the neighborhood. Slicing up the property, however, to squeeze in a new home and an awkward standalone garage to make a quick buck without regard to neighboring residents, aesthetics, property values, or drainage concerns is entirely inappropriate. Thank you for your time, and I reserve all rights to take further legal action in connection with this proposal to the extent necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Kaiser.
First of all, thank you to Jason Meltzer. I echo all of his concerns that he has raised here. I'm not going to repeat all of them. I think he did so in a very eloquent manner and cannot support them more. Thank you very much, Jason. I greatly appreciate it. My main concern is the drainage issue. And I know it's been raised, but I think it's not been, I'm going to put some figures to what has actually happened. On July 8th, 2019, we did have a very large storm. It was called a 100-year storm. That 100-year storm caused the complete flooding of not only Kingsgate, but Rock Run Drive, which is normally where that road is built upon a former riverbed or stream bed. My house was subject to about, I want to say, in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $7,000 worth of damage due to water coming up into my yard, going down into the manhole cover and coming up through the house and through my toilet. As a result, I had to gut most of my basement to remove items in there. Thankfully, there was no expensive items or major things that I had to remove, but I had to completely redo my bathroom. Neighbors of ours along Rock Run and in the adjacent River Falls neighborhood were not as lucky. Some were subject to over hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage due to the improper drainage. I understand that there were potentially some mitigating factors, and there's mitigating factors into the plan that were built in. That has not been the case. My wife and I, every time we see a heavy storm, we are constantly watching the front of our yard for concerns that there will be additional flooding. The drainage in the neighborhood is not appropriate, and you see that upon any type of reasonably heavy storm, not a 100-year storm. In fact, a few months after that 100-year storm, another storm came through and damaged numerous households along Rock Run and in the River Falls neighborhood. We have constantly seen over the past few years storms that have caused flooding into our front yard. Putting additional hardscape, whether it be the house, the driveway, whatever it might be, while those items maybe have some water mitigation to them, they are not as porous as the ground, and they will not deal with the rainwater the same. That is my major concern, that this house being built across, so this developer, as Jason mentioned, can make a quick buck, will result in me having to worry about and potential and likely pay for future water damage to my lot, along with the houses along Rock Run and down in the River Falls neighborhood. That property sits, as far as a water plane, above my house. I watch the water come from that yard into mine and across the street. I would strongly urge the board to reject this proposal based on everything Jason has said, and also for the reasons of water mitigation. I looked through the plan. I'm seriously concerned that the amount of driveway space, roof space that will not be able to collect any water will then cause the water to run across that yard, across Kingsgate Road, and into my house at 8405 Kingsgate. Again, thank you for your time, but I sincerely hope that the board rejects this proposal and save the residents of my house, well, of me, along Rock Run and down into the River Falls neighborhood, future water damage, so this property developer can make extra money through one sale of a development of a house. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the applicant to see if the applicant would like to discuss anything that's in the staff report or what you've heard so far.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, Suli Cho.
Not sure your mic. Oh, maybe it is. Hard to see. Yeah. Okay. You're good.
Right, I'm good.
Just wanted to make sure.
For the record, Suli Cho with Bregman, Burbert, Schwartz, and Gilday for the applicant. And I have with me Mr. Dave McKee, the civil engineer. Thank you, Chair, and the members of the board. I just would like to briefly address some of the issues that have been raised so far. In particular, in terms of the compatibility of the subdivision and introducing a new home on this property. And we believe, and is consistent with the staff recommendation, that in fact it is consistent with the streetscape along Rock Run. If you look at the lots, the other lots to the north are deeper, but from the perspective of the streetscape and the separation of the homes and how it's organized, the proposal actually is in line with that in terms of compatibility in our view. Also, it's the same along Kingsgate. You see homes that are sited very similar in nature on this corner. I'm not sure if we could bring it up, in fact, but there is a corner two lots up near Chandler Road and Rock Run, which is further up north, which would be almost identical to the configuration of what we're talking about at this corner lot. You have two homes that are sited on lots that are at the corner that are not as deep as some of the other lots on Rock Run. So there really is a mixture of lot configurations, and it is not entirely uniform. And in fact, this obviously with this, as you could see from the staff report, it meets all standards and requirements in terms of the zoning ordinance. We wouldn't be here otherwise. The lot frontage, the size, and so forth. So I really don't believe that there is any issue in terms of compatibility. Yes, this is a change. This is a change to what the immediate neighbors have seen on this property, and change is hard. But this change is in conformance with all applicable laws and regulations. It conforms with the subdivision regulations of the county. And it will be done in a manner that is compatible and in keeping with the neighborhood. In terms of the water drainage issues, as staff indicated, there was a storm drainage analysis done, as is required with every subdivision application, and to its impacts. We would just simply note that, in particular, I guess one of the community members, Mr. Kaiser, his property and the water issues that he's identified, in fact, his property is located upstream from this particular site. We don't anticipate that this introduction of this home would in any way further impact his property or issues. There may be issues further upstream that is affecting the amount of water that is experienced by some of the properties, but this particular for this site or for the application that is before you, we are actually downstream from Mr. Kaiser. In terms of the sidewalk issue, we understand.
That's not true. You are not downstream from me. It is upstream.
Okay,
It is
sir,
up the hill.
sir,
That is factual.
you're done speaking, and if you do that again, I'm going to have to kick you off the Teams meeting. So please let the applicant speak. It's their turn.
It's across the street, up the hill.
Okay.
Just one lot up.
All right. That's the information that we were provided. So, in any case, it is one lot. It is.
Could
I'm
you
sorry,
repeat the
could you
statement
say that
before you
again?
interrupted? I couldn't hear what you were saying.
I'm sorry.
I couldn't hear what you were saying because of the interruption.
Oh, I was just going to move on to the sidewalk issue. Thank you. In terms of the sidewalk issue, we understand that there was some last-minute conversations between staff, and we just wanted to address that. Just for the record, the sidewalks are shown on the site plan, or the preliminary plan. It is not objected to by the applicant in terms of either constructing it or paying a fee in lieu. The language, our understanding is that the language of the condition is a standard provision that allows DPS as the implementing agency for the building permit to make a case-by-case determination whether a sidewalk in a particular location, rather than a fee in lieu, makes sense. And the money's used toward putting a sidewalk in another location where it is much more of achieve connectivity. So that, our understanding, was a standard condition that's has been included for many years in the board's resolution.
Well, if I could just interrupt you there, we have a new practice which we developed over the course of many months in consultation with interested members of the public, including the people in the real estate business. And essentially we have a different practice, which is we're not going to recommend allowing DPS to decide whether or not to require construction of the sidewalk. Rather, the standard condition will be to require it as a condition of approval with the board if there is a rare circumstance where construction of a sidewalk is not warranted or causes other problems that outweigh the benefits. There's a process for fee in lieu, but it's not the process it's not the process that's described on page 14 of the staff report, which I believe was in error. But the condition that's in there, I think, is fine, and it calls for construction of the sidewalk. If you want to argue that you shouldn't be required to construct a sidewalk, you're going to be paying a fee in lieu. So that's basically the situation. We're not in the business of telling DPS, go ahead and make up your mind after at some point later. That's going to be a condition of the planning board's approval, which if you want to litigate that issue, you're going to have to do it in front of us.
So if I could just further on that comment. So the issue is that the request presented to you wasn't for a fee in lieu. So we could have requested a fee in lieu rather than a
Right, but the options are not build it or ask DPS if you can have permission not to build it. That's the point I'm trying to make.
And if
Contrary
I-
to what's sort of implied by the paragraph on page 14. But you're not asking for it, so that's fine. So if you're not asking for fee in lieu here, you're going to build it. Those are your choices. Ask here or build.
Well, if it's not too late, I do think that it makes sense to request a fee in lieu in this particular situation where the likelihood of having a connection because of the nature of the rest of the lots along both Rock Run and Kings Gate, these properties are not coming back in.
What I'm suggesting, you can do that, and you can see how you do with the board and with the staff, but what I'm telling you is you're pretty late in the process because we have a new process for this. Really, this should be hashed out at DRC if you want a staff recommendation for fee in lieu. But in any case, don't even think about asking us to approve a condition that says DPS will argue with you about it later.
Was that made, I think that was, a late-breaking evolution.
Well, we adopted this policy in public a couple months
Yeah.
ago, so just for your information.
I was aware of that policy. I don't think that there was this connection between how that would impact the what DPS otherwise has under its statutory
Well, what I'm
abilities.
saying is the board is not going to approve
Yeah,
a
understood.
condition that doesn't resolve this question. We are not
Understood.
going to defer to DPS and say they can do whatever they feel like. While they may have statutory authority to do that in the absence of a board condition, we have independent legal authority, I believe, to ensure the adequacy, safety, and efficiency of pedestrian, vehicle, bicycle, access, transportation, infrastructure, and so we're going to exercise that. So whatever residual authority DPS might have, you're not going to get a planning board condition of approval that doesn't hash this out.
And I understand that it is late in the process to have had that conversation. So that's the disconnect that I think I was missing. Our understanding was that those conversations occurred and that's why the condition was written the way it was. But on that point, we will accept the condition as modified. I mean, on it, I'm here to say
In the
that
future,
the
if you want a
applicant-
fee
yeah, I mean,
waiver, talk
the-
about it at DRC.
Sure.
That's
The
what I'm saying.
applicant doesn't think it's a good idea. The neighborhood obviously also didn't want the sidewalk, but I understand that if that
Well,
issue was
part of the
case-
reason we went through this, and I spent a lot of time offline hashing this out,
Mm-hmm.
and we went through a lot of back and forth with the people in the development world to try to hash that, because we don't want to talk about this at the board.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Really, this is not a thing where you should come to the board and ask us for, relief from this condition. We don't want to be in the business of spending 20 minutes arguing about sidewalks every time there's a two-lot
Understood.
subdivision. So
Understood.
if you could bring that to DRC, make your case, perhaps under specified circumstances, maybe you'll meet the condition that's in the new practice, which is all laid out in writing and is
Sure.
publicly available, and then the staff can recommend that we approve a fee in lieu. That's the process.
Understood.
I'm
As I said-
sorry, I
yeah.
don't mean to. Mr. Chair, but can't we, as a board, make that decision today, even without a staff recommendation on the sidewalk? Because, there's testimony that the neighbors don't want the sidewalk, and if they're prepared to do a fee in lieu instead, and looking at the fact that there are no sidewalks and the area, I believe what Ms. Lee.
Yes, the short answer is we could do that. What
Okay.
I'm saying is that we want to avoid encouraging people coming to the board to
Right.
make this argument, because I don't know about you, but I don't think it's a good use of board time to have to hash these issues out, so that's why we have the policy. So we can certainly consider that.
Okay,
We can-
thank you.
I'm sorry, I was turned off the mic. We can certainly consider that, but you see what I'm saying, that's,
No, I understand that we don't want to have to consider it at the last minute, but on this particular case, I'm not sure there's a significant amount of discussion that would be necessary, but we'll talk about that.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And just by way of explanation, and this is not intended to be an excuse, my retention on this matter was after the DRC, and it sort of came to be fully baked. And so I'm just trying to do my best to represent the client in terms of their intention. If he has to, he would construct the sidewalk, but it was his understanding that conversation was going to happen with
Yeah,
DPS.
and the point I'm
input.
making is do not assume there will be any conversations after you get to the planning board about sidewalks.
So
Please.
at that point, to that point, then we would request that we have that conversation here today because, in terms of whether it makes sense on this particular corner in light of this whole street and the likelihood of DPS ever coming through here with a CIP project or any of these other properties coming to you to then complete the section to Falls, it's highly unlikely. And so we believe that the monies would be best used to implement pieces of sidewalk that actually would provide connectivity and achieve the goal that I believe the board is trying to achieve.
Okay, we'll come back to the staff on that to see how that syncs up with our policy. Anything else?
No.
Okay, thanks very much. Are there questions? or
Mr. Chair,
comments?
would you like me to speak on that, on the policy?
Now would be as good a time as any, I guess, yeah.
Sure. At present, we don't believe that this application actually meets our current policy to waive the sidewalk. So number one, it doesn't meet the threshold, the minimum threshold for lot size, as well as road classification. So that's written in Chapter 49. So we don't believe that off the bat we have the ability to waive the placement of sidewalk. We also have a new proportionality guide, which we also don't believe that this application meets. So as we've stated in the staff report and as corrected, that our position is to have the applicant construct the sidewalk, that the location in a residential community is appropriate for sidewalk, and we, according to our current policy, don't have a clear way to waive the sidewalk.
Okay, well, yeah, we can talk about this. Do you, maybe we should come back to this after we address some of these other issues. Do board members have questions about or comments about anything other than the sidewalk?
Yeah, well, is this a school bus pickup point, the corner of the lot? Is that where children are?
No.
That's not an issue?
Directly across the street.
Okay,
from the
Mr.
property
Meltzer, Mr. Meltzer, the question is not addressed to you. Okay.
Apologies.
Thank you.
Apologies.
I was
didn't
asking
know who it was
staff.
addressed.
Staff is not aware whether this is a pickup and drop-off location, but according to the community, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board on anything other than the sidewalk? And then
Other
we'll
than
do
the
that.
sidewalk? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to make a couple of comments about what the speakers said and the response by the applicant and where essentially I am as a board member to clarify a few things. One of the things that was said was this is about change. Ms. Licho indicated that, which I think she's right, because if you could pull up page 16 of the report that shows the neighborhood. So first I want to talk about where we are. This is a subdivision application. So the things that aren't addressed today at the board that we wouldn't delve into further is stormwater management. Essentially, that is an issue at building permit. At subdivision, a concept plan would be approved by the Department of Permitting Service. Would be approved by Department of Permitting Services, and then as the project went into building permit, they would look at stormwater management in a much more detailed fashion based on the improvements and how they're being built. So today at subdivision, as long as there's an approved concept plan, and I would posit that the stormwater is going to, the treatment of the stormwater will actually help the neighborhood as it is, because there probably isn't much stormwater management treatment in this area, but with new construction, that does improve over time. So that's one thing. The other is with regard to Mr. Meltzer's comments about the house and the size of the homes, et cetera, and the existing home. That is also not an issue for subdivision. What subdivision is looking at is the land, is the lots, and whether or not they're consistent with what the law provides. So this area is R200, which allows for a 20,000 square foot lot size. If you could go to page 16, that shows, not page 3. I don't know, it's just the number 16 was on the bottom. It shows the neighborhood a
Page
little bit
16 of
better.
the staff report.
No. That's
Oh,
that's it.
slide
That's
16,
the one I
sorry.
want. Okay. So what I'm looking at when you're talking about, I mean, compatibility is not. It's really whether the lot size, not the homes, but the lots fit within the neighborhood. And I also believe that Ms. Lee Cho is correct in that your view from Rock Run, you're going to have consistency in your frontage. It's about 100 feet for the others, 125 feet for each of these two new lots that would occur. Also, if you look behind, if you go to Kingsgate, you go to Brickyard Road, just behind where this these lots. If you look at what the 3-lot configuration is, it's really the subdivision itself that's being proposed, the lot behind it, and then the Mr. Meltzer's home adjoining it. It's pretty consistent with what you see at the corner of Kingsgate and Brickyard in terms of the frontage. Although that's only 2 lots, the sizes of those lots are pretty consistent with what's being proposed, the way that I see it. And so I think that within the subdivision, for a preliminary plan of subdivision application, I don't see how we could not approve what's being proposed. It's all within the confines of the law. So I'm leaning towards approving it as it was proposed for those reasons, because it is a preliminary plan of subdivision. The other details, construction, stormwater management, will be handled as part of a DPS application for building permits. And then we can talk about the sidewalks when the chair's prepared to do that.
I just want to echo what Commissioner Rubin said. You know, looking at the neighborhood as a whole, and even Mr. Meltzer's home at 10705 Rock Run, that is only 15 feet from the applicant's boundary of the property, along with 8410 Kingsgate Road, which is also built at an angle, is 20 feet from the property line. In fact, just literally catty corner, 8409 Kingsgate Road has only 10-foot setbacks on or side setbacks on the side of the home, and is only almost built entirely to the maximum of the envelope that's probably required for that piece of property. But in terms of how setbacks are calculated, especially on the frontage side, it's usually an average of all the homes. And you can see along Rock Run from the slide that there are a wide variety of different kinds of frontages. So in terms of, character of the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood is actually pretty diverse when you look at the kind of housing, the new teardowns that are happening. It looks like there were 2 homes that are being built by Classic Homes, and then a wide variety of different kinds of homes. I saw something that's more of a Spanish revival. I've seen traditional colonial homes. I've seen craftsmen. There's a wide variety of homes. So I'm not really, I don't believe that this is actually changing anything, but just to echo what Commissioner Rubin is saying, when you do have a approved stormwater plan management system, there are civil engineers that calculate what your water runoff will be and how you're going to control the water and ensure that it's staying within the confines of your lot. So I think it's actually going to improve any issues that may occur in this neighborhood, particularly, with the older homes that have no stormwater management. New construction, despite the narrative, actually improves the situation. So I'm going to hold comments now. I do have some opinions on the sidewalks, but I know Chair Anderson wants to wait for that. But otherwise, I see no issues with this application.
Yeah, I mean, on this compatibility with the lot issue, I think that infill by definition is going to weave additional structures into the fabric of the neighborhood. So, if we were to embrace this general line of argument that's advanced by the opponents, we'd basically be saying you can never increase the development intensity of a neighborhood, and that's just not that's not the law, and that would not be good policy because we're trying to accommodate infill, and obviously in a way that is compatible with the existing development. But this is something we're trying to encourage because, yes, developers do make money by selling houses, but they also sell those houses to people who live in them, and that's generally, all other things being equal, in the public interest. On the drainage issue, I think I want to underscore what Carol said, which is that the stormwater concept plan and the existing rules concerning drainage in the building code, I think, are really designed to ensure that, in all likelihood, new development, even though it may add net imperviousness, is done in such a way that stormwater performance will be improved, or at the very least not be degraded, because the standard will be that water is supposed to be infiltrated or treated at a degree which may not be enough to accommodate all the extreme weather events that we experience, but will replicate or approximate the performance of woods in good condition, which would be an undeveloped state, which is the relevant standard of the law. And there's a reason that's the standard of the law, because if you had zero development at all, you would be talking about the performance of woods in good condition. With that, I turn to the sidewalk and open to discussion on this. To be honest, I don't think it would be end of the world to approve a fee in lieu here, but I do strongly urge the board in thinking about this. We just approved a new policy about this. We should not be deviating from that policy lightly, and we should not be looking at each one of these cases as though it were a matter of first impression. We have a process, we have substantive standards, and they're there for a reason, to avoid having to spend an hour arguing about sidewalks in every subdivision case. So with that, I will let Carol speak, because I think she's waving her hand.
Yeah, well, I agree that, we have the policy. The reason for it is that so that we get that discussion early, so that there's an appropriate recommendation from staff. In this case, they did not have that opportunity, so I would implore other applicants to please get those discussions in early. However, in this case, I agree with the neighbors that there's no reason to put a sidewalk in this one lot. I don't see any, and as Ms. Lee Cho also indicated, it doesn't look like there's going to be a lot more redevelopment in the area that would bring DPS, bring the county to provide sidewalks in this area. I like the idea of reducing the impervious surfaces as part of this construction. And so I'm prepared. I think it's consistent with it's not exactly consistent with the policy, but according to our council, we have the authority at the board to not to waive the sidewalk, but to allow for the alternative of fee in lieu. And so I would recommend, and I would be happy to approve with that adjustment of that condition, to provide a fee in lieu instead of having the applicant construct the sidewalk on as indicated in condition 9C.
And I think I'll support Commissioner Rubin on this. I mean, to echo Chair Anderson's point, there is a process that's relatively new, so I think we can kind of looking forward, ensure that we follow that process. But just looking at the site, looking at how many teardowns have already occurred, I don't see a CIP in the future of this area, and I think the sidewalks would be better built elsewhere. So I'll support the fee in lieu, but just with the idea of what Chair Anderson said.
Just to interrupt, I apologize again, Chris Van Alstyne for the record. So I'm just doing the quick calculation. This is our new policy on the thing that would apply is the de minimis policy for frontage improvements. On that calculation, there's a formula, there's a calculation that's based on the minimum front building, the minimum building width the front building line building width. You multiply that. This is in particular to the corner lot, which has multiple frontages because it's a corner lot. The formula there is you multiply the 100-foot minimum, which is per the zone, the R200 zone, 100 feet times 3 times the number of units, that comes out to 300 feet. If it's greater than 300 feet, then we could apply the de minimis policy. In this position, I believe that the actual frontage width is, length is 299 feet. So it's just under the ability for this policy to apply.
Well, look, I don't love this, but I could go along with it. I think if we're going to do that, we should apply the formula as it would otherwise apply to 299 feet.
We can certainly do that.
I had one question. There was a small corner designation. Would that still take place, or is that needed? There's marked in red, like a little triangle at the corner. It said corner designation.
Yeah, that's the chamfer. So I believe
that would survive.
No, so we're not changing the lot
Okay.
lines here. This
Gotcha.
is
All right.
just if we're trying to determine a fee in lieu.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if that's what you guys want to do, then I would suggest that we write the condition, say they're either going to build it or they're going to pay at the rate that would otherwise apply under the de minimis policy. And I think we should get the PIE and PUE, because in the event that DOT does in fact come back and build a sidewalk, we need the right-of-way. So I would retain that part of the existing condition. Anybody have any issues with that?
Nope, sounds good to me.
So with that, I'll make a motion. Did Tina have any? No?
No.
With that, I'll make a motion to approve the application with the adjustment to the condition so that it allows the applicant to either construct or to pay the fee in lieu based on the formula as indicated for the 299 feet, but that the dedication would still apply to the application and to
Or the easement.
allow.
Yeah.
Is it an easement? Okay, so the easement would still apply in the event that DPS would in the future have a sidewalk project.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back in a minute for item 6, which is pros. Okay, we're back to talk about the pros plan with Ho-Jung Garland and Darren Flouché. Go for it.
I just had to check if it was morning. Good morning. For the record, Darren Flouché, Division Chief for Park Planning and Stewardship.
For the record, I am Ho-Jung Garland, Park Planning Supervisor.
And we are here this morning to provide you all with an update for what we have been up to since the last Planning Board item on the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan, the PROS plan. Provide an overview of a reminder of what you all had requested of us for some minor edits to make, and the edits that we had been requested by the Department of Natural Resources, and then briefly review the edits that we made in response to that without going into excessive details. And then our final item will be to request approval of the PROS plan for submission to the Department of Natural Resources. So just to provide an update and a reminder of the schedule, we last met with you all on December 9th and provided an overview of the draft plan. Had a good discussion about that plan with you all. Later that month, we submitted the plan to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and the Maryland Department of Planning. While we were waiting review by those agencies, we posted the draft and had an open town hall survey from the end of December through February. And Ho-Jung will review briefly the feedback that we got from that survey. And then on March 7th, we received comments from the Department of Natural Resources, and we will walk through what we did in response to those comments. And that brings us to today, where we have provided in the staff report the final draft plan, and we'll be requesting approval by the board for submittal by July 1st of the final PROS submission to DNR. And with that, we will proceed. So as I mentioned, we'll summarize what we heard from the open town hall, key DNR comments and responses, and planning board discussion. Ho-Jung?
I'll walk you through with the town hall survey result. So as Darren said, we posted this draft report about a month or so, and there was over 460 number of responses. So it's been very interested by the public, which is great. So the way the survey is structured is that we since every chapter had a set of recommendations, we posted the set of recommendation by the chapter and asked people to rank it. So that way, once we get the result, the rank will guide us when we are advancing this plan. So that was the purpose of the survey. So, having said that, the first chapter was about the purpose of the parks, recreation, and open spaces, and this was ranked as the top 3. The first one was widely access and equally distribute the recreation opportunities, and second, public spaces to accommodate multiple needs. Third, opportunities suited to the diverse interests and needs. So to illustrate, this is the activation event happened in Black Hill Regional Park about color and kites. And as you can see, the park is utilized not just sports, but also celebrate culture and diverse population itself. So this is like one of the good example to illustrate these kind of priorities. The second chapter was about the priorities for physical activities. So top three public recognized is the continue to develop a world-class trail network and promoting active lifestyles and encourage people to be physically active. And this picture really well illustrated. This is the activation event also happened in Route to Rocks. Actually, the mastermind is sitting next to me, and it was wildly successful. And as you can see in the world-class trail network, actually park staff itself is leading to encourage the active lifestyles and encourage the people to be physically active. So next chapter is about priorities, for social connections and civic engagement. The first priority public identified is the intentionally designed spaces to support casual and impromptu use and connect with the nature. The second priority was focused on social connection needs of seniors, teens, young adults, and people with disabilities. The third priority was build more community garden. So as you can see, we've been actually doing also the activation event using the skateboarders, and it's been widely successful. The last chapter was about the natural resource and environmental stewardship. So top three priorities were recognized as the acquire land to protect natural resources and provide public access to natural areas, and reaffirm the commitment to resource conservation, stewardship, and sustainability practices. And next, I'll walk you through key DNR comments and responses. So while PRO is actually the policy plan, so we've been actually discussing a lot to craft language of the policy and also crafted this plan to be defensible argument. On the background, actually, for DNR, this is like the opportunity to collect the data. So a lot of comment has been actually coming about additional information and detailed data, which is not impacting for main key storyline of this plan is conveying. So I just want to especially note on that. So therefore, the question came from DNR based on the several different subject matter experts. First, actually, as I said, since it's about the data collection opportunity for DNR, they were very impressed about Montgomery County's the extent of the data presence itself. So they were very favorably commenting about that. And other than that, they requested more information, such as the information on estimating park use. Usually the permit data is usually recognized as like the go-to resource. However, other than that, there could be many other tools such as eco counter or community garden waiting list, or even collecting the anonymized cell phone data, which was our pilot. So those language has been added in appendix, page 24 as a response. And then another list of comments could be how level of service is prioritized. We have extensive of chart provided for level of service, which is one thing, but how do we prioritize is the other story. So DNR wanted to actually hear more about it. So the way we expand about this comment is that we do actually utilize EFA, Equity Focus Area, and then EIA, which is Equity Improvement Area. So those two filters are utilized to prioritize our level of service when there's gap recognized. So that response is included in appendix page 21. The next set of comment was how parks coordinate CIP project with municipalities. Since they are the grantor, they're always curious how we're spending their money and how is it distributed fairly with the municipalities. So the answer is actually for example, as a POS grant, the program open space grant itself is apportioned based on the population number with the municipalities. So the answer is provided in appendix page 75. And then they were also very interested about water access. There was actually multiple comments about the water access, and they wanted us to include not just our water access from Montgomery County parks, but also federal and state level as well. So total 25 water access is included in the map, which is appendix page 37, and also related to CIP project. For example, recently we got awarded waterway improvements grant, and we are spending that money in addition to our own CIP to improve Seneca Landing, Seneca Special Park for boat ramp. So that project is listed in appendix page 77. And last but not least, the inventory data. Since, as I said, DNR is very much interested in the data collection, and since it's been 6 months, we updated the level of service chart with the additional inventory, and so those chart and revised number is included in appendix page 29 through 32. Okay, so Darren will take over from here.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we had a good discussion with you all back in December about the draft pros plan, and I'm just going to remind us about a few of the things that were discussed and requested, and note our responses to them. So the first was on the chapter on social engagement. We had a request to just specifically note that signage is involved in the interpretation. Add mention of buskers and having performance in our parks, and encourage both pop-up concessions and food trucks. We already had a discussion of food trucks, but note other pop-up concessions and permanent concessions. And so in response to that, we inserted that relevant language to include the word buskers explicitly in our discussion of performance in parks and so forth. The next item that was requested was similar to the DNR item that Ho Jung mentioned, a request for what data we use for prioritization, was a request to add a discussion of our equity index. So as Ho Jung mentioned, we just added a little bit more information on how we developed and used the equity focus area tool and the experience improvement areas tool as part of our planning and prioritization processes. Next, there was a request to clarify and really strengthen a discussion that was already in the plan about the fact that recommendations need to be and project priorities need to be based not only on the loudest voice we may hear at a public meeting, but also on a combination of research, data collection, and a balanced public input process. So we reorganized that discussion a little bit. We had already had a list of the decision-making tools that offer a range of guidance, right, of tools that offer different strategies along these lines. And then we expanded language regarding our notification and outreach methods to note that some smaller projects will have less notification, larger projects will have more notification and outreach, depending on the nature and the scope of the project. And then the final request was to, and this is something we've heard consistently, was to simplify the park classifications. I'm just going to show the 2017 pros categories. In 2017, we had added a large number of urban parks classifications. This was to emphasize the direction that our Parks Department was going, and to encourage us to develop a range of maybe more nuanced or sophisticated types of urban parks. But you can see on the list there, plazas, urban greenways, urban recreational parks, neighborhood greens, urban recreational parklets, and pocket greens. As a matter of fact, we never really integrated those classifications into our parks inventory. If you look at the names of our parks and the classifications of our parks, between 2017 and 2021, 22, you don't see parks of those names and those park classifications. We do have some planned, and so there are some sector plans that use those names, but we never really integrated those names into our system. And so we're simplifying, really reverting back more to a 2012 structure here.
So, question, why would we not classify a neighborhood conservation area for newly acquired parkland if in fact it is a conservation area?
Sure.
If it's in an urban area versus will we just call it a conservation area as opposed to an urban, like which one would it be classified as?
Right, okay, so to that point about neighborhood conservation areas, we have about 50 neighborhood conservation areas which are distinct from our conservation area parks. So we've got parks that serve a strong conservation purpose and suitable public access, right? Our typical conservation parks. Then we have these neighborhood conservation areas, the 50 that I mentioned. Those are, historically, we received most of those because they were not developable property, and we didn't have other policy mechanisms to prohibit development on them or otherwise deal with them, so they became parks. They're not really parks in any way that the public would recognize. They don't have any activities in them, and they're really just tucked away slices of undevelopable green space.
Many of them today would be probably put in a forest conservation easement, and we wouldn't take them because we don't want to maintain them. They're like these little outlots, or in some cases they're entirely encircled by homes, so nobody except the people in the subdivision even have physically the ability to get access to them, and they appear to be just designed to make sure that nobody cut down the trees. And so now we have, of course, the Forest Conservation Law, Category 1 Forest Conservation Easements. The other category of these is, to be perfectly blunt about it, properties that somebody talked the park store into buying because they didn't want to see somebody develop the lot next door. And I'm sorry to say I approved a couple of these during my tenure, but we should never do that again. I mean, it's really like there are these lots that are like you go visit them, as I did, all the parks, and you're like, okay, here's a vacant lot, and it's our neighborhood conservation area, and really, it's nothing. It's not, to even call it a conservation purpose is really not a fair characterization.
So if somebody were to, in a smaller area, in a urban area or setting, would we accept a dedication of it, or would we simply say, put it in a Category 1? Because I agree, we shouldn't be acquiring these small, little, they don't usually provide a benefit except to that area and for conservation purposes. But that's what a forest conservation easement would do. So are we saying that we're not going to be? I mean, clearly we're not going to acquire them. But would we basically could we, if an applicant wanted to dedicate it to the parkland, to the Parks Department or the commission, I don't know, would we just indicate or recommend instead that it be placed in a Category 1 easement? But the question is, what if it doesn't meet the requirements of a forest conservation or of a forest? Because a forest has to be a certain size and shape, and I don't think we wouldn't want, if it's simply conservation and there is no maintenance necessarily, or is there? Is that really where it's coming from?
It's a little bit of there's
no such thing as a maintenance-free piece of land, and sometimes we do see these cases, including pretty substantial pieces of land, where developers try to get the Parks Department to take it in dedication, and the Parks says, no thanks, we don't want to have to deal with it. I think that we have other tools in addition to the, obviously, Forest Conservation Law. There's also mechanisms to simply say that, well, this is going to be recorded as an outlot, it's going to be HOA property, or if there's some reason we want it, there's nothing about this policy that prevents us from taking it in dedication. It's just this neighborhood conservation area is sort of like the last refuge of scoundrels, of people trying to either offload things that they don't want to maintain onto the Parks Department and make it the government's problem to basically get rid of the non-native invasives, or try to get us to buy something because they don't want a developer to buy it.
So is there a way, and maybe I missed this in the pros plan, is there something that basically is a recommendation that we prefer not to acquire these?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I went on your tour of all the parks, and one of them was a little narrow thing around houses. Yeah, I remember that visit, but would there be any reversion back to private ownership, or you want to keep we have a policy for trees, and so it's serving that purpose of maintaining some trees, I guess. But
our recommendation at this point is preserve the status quo of those 50 parks. Right. That's why the language
go
is...
Go forth and sin no more.
Yes. We sort of recognize it as a parks category that exists for the 50 that exist, and we're trying to really take it off the board for new.
Okay, that's the number you have, 50, where you really
Ballpark.
wouldn't have. And you would not have activities in there, per se?
They do not typically.
They do not, right. I mean, if someone wanted a picnic bench in there, that may be...
We know of instances where neighbors have brought seating
Yeah.
to a neighborhood conservation area.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And I believe, that is it for the summary. So good timing for questions.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say, having read this document now twice, I think it's fantastic. You guys have done a great job, and I actually think you guys should probably nominate it for some sort of recognition or award. I think you guys have done such an incredible, thorough. Basically, you've covered almost every single subject I can think of, and I'm always struck about how many tennis courts we have that no one's using and how many dog parks we need. That never gets old, but you've identified everything that we need moving forward, and I think it's a complete package. So to that extent, I think it's worth some form of recognition. So that's my only comment. But great job, and thank you so much for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Vice Chair. It was, I expressed my appreciation for the work last time when we saw the last draft, and I thought it was, stellar. And it's still up there, and probably it's been improved, and I appreciate the way that you incorporated all the different changes, and good job. Thank you very much.
I just want to take a moment to, this wonderful work you've seen is actually with incredible amount of staff who is behind. This, as I said, this is an extensive data-based plan. So ITI and our, data staff, they've been working day and night to crank this number. So thank you so much for acknowledging the staff hard work, and they should be shined at the background. So I really appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions? I have to take a moment to interrupt our regular social program and to take notice that it's Darren's birthday. It's also Jazzy the intern's birthday.
It's my daughter's birthday.
It's Carol's daughter's birthday. It's our general counsel's birthday, Adrian Gardner. It's Bridget Breuer's birthday. Did I miss anybody's birthday? Not that I know of. Somebody will probably.
Sure, somebody. We're going to leave somebody out.
Will send me an angry email about I missed somebody's birthday, but that's okay.
I'm always happy to meet other people named Darren and other people with June 16th birthdays. So
well, this is a big day for you then.
Yeah.
Okay. Could we get a motion to approve the pros plan?
And with that, I do want to
with permission to make some correct typographical errors, copy edit, and make formatting changes to make it look pretty, so we can submit it for an award as Barthop had suggested.
So moved.
And I will second that as my birthday gift.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? That's approved unanimously. Thank you very much for all your work on that.
Thank you so much.
And that's it.
The only thing I never gave you anything.